Our next speaker is Kathy Cadillac.
It's not what you think. Thank you, Steve. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Is this on? Okay, how's that? Is that better? Good. Okay, if not, I'm going to get the handheld mic. Yeah, I think they can hear me. Hi, everyone. I'm going to move around a little bit. As Leonard mentioned, I just retired March 2nd after 13 years at the Department of Justice and almost 29 years in the federal government. And actually, it wasn't until I got to the Department of Justice that I got involved with what we call employee programs. Before that time, I was the director of an administrative policy staff, and I have even been a deputy director of a administrative services division overseeing things like facilities management and printing and graphics and procurement. So I wanted to make that point because I don't come at this from a Pollyanna perspective. I think these programs are vitally important, and Telework actually is a wonderful program that, if administered properly, can really make a difference in benefiting the organization as well as the individual. I actually wanted to start out with a couple of questions for you. The first one is, if I told you that I had a device that would increase productivity by 70%, that's 70%, within 18 months, how many of you would give it a try? Could I see a show of hands? I'm assuming everybody will put their hand up for that one, okay. How many of you currently supervise teleworkers? Again, could I see a show of hands? So we do have a few people with experience in the room. How many of you have actually teleworked yourself? Okay, good. Okay, well, we're done with the post-lunch aerobic workout. Thank you very much. Let's move on. I mentioned the example of telework having a significant impact on productivity in a short amount of time. And that, in fact, happened. The Office of Administrative Appeals at the former INS conducted a telework pilot study. And what they did was they asked people to volunteer to telework, and they went from no teleworking at all to teleworking 4 days a week. So in order to be in the pilot, you had to telework 4 days a week. Within 18 months, productivity went up by 70%. You don't have to take my word for it. I've given you the site on the Department of Justice Work-Life website. You can actually look at that study and see it. It's very compelling. The way that they were able to track productivity, in case you're wondering, is that appellate attorneys review a certain number of briefs every week. So at the outset of the study, they looked at how many briefs their attorneys were reviewing. And then 18 months down the road, they checked again. And that's how they were able to track the productivity increase. Productivity, by the way, went up among the attorneys who stayed in the main office, probably because there were fewer distractions with half of their colleagues working from a home office. When it comes to managing, I guess, well, there it is. One of the first bits of advice I would give you if you're going to manage teleworkers is to adjust your management style to let go a little bit. So by letting go, what I'm talking about, Laura, you can move to the next slide for me, thank you, is focusing, you've heard this, manage by results. Focus on the outcome of what the employee is doing and less on them sitting at their desks. If you know what you mean when you say quality work, if you know what you mean by timeliness, then you're going to be able to tell whether or not your employees are getting the job done on the level that you expect. The idea of remote work really isn't that novel. We tend to think of this as some dangerous cutting-edge idea. It really isn't. For over a century, there have been many jobs carried out in our country by people who were not being directly supervised by their managers. I've given you a few examples on this slide. The federal government first officially ventured into telework with the 1990 FlexiPlace pilot study. FlexiPlace is synonymous with telework. That was 17 years ago. Over the past dozen years, several public laws have been established to facilitate telework, including in the recent years, in about the past 4 years or so, teleworks that mandate expansion, public laws that mandate expansion of telework. The Department of Justice was directly impacted by that because a couple of those public laws were actually part of our appropriations bill, and we were required to certify that we offered telework to 100% of eligible staff or risk losing $5 million, and you better believe that got management's attention. And then things started to really evolve. So many of our Department of Justice organizations now offer telework on a regular basis. Now that, if you think about it, is in a law enforcement environment. So I would suggest to you that if we can make it work, most organizations can. So in terms of looking at more specifically, how do you design an effective telework program? Or if you already have one, improve on it a little bit. If you practice what I call, to make it easy, the 3 C's, you'll pave the way to a successful, well-structured program. The first one is consistency. The second one is communication. And the third one is confirmation. And for the Catholics in the room, confirmation is not what you think. Stay tuned. Consistency. By that I mean finding a consistent approach for employees to request telework and for you and other supervisors to make decisions to grant or deny those requests. At the Department of Justice, we use a standardized telework agreement form, which, by the way, is published on the Justice Work Life website. And even though I recently retired, what I'm saying to you is true. You can go in there and take advantage of this. In the last couple of years, we had a multi-agency team streamline this form. So I'd highly recommend that you look at it. That team consisted of representatives from the litigating divisions, the FBI, the DEA, the U.S. Marshal Service. We came up with a form that is just 1 page front and back, and it addresses the kinds of issues a manager is going to want to hear about in order to make an informed decision. It also has attachments that address questions about information security, timekeeping, pay, leave, even safety issues. So again, that form is available. It's in PDF format, which is nice because an employee can fill it out online and email it to their supervisor. It's very easy to modify the form if you liked it and wanted to tailor it to your organization's use. We also need to have a consistent approach for deciding on requests for flexibility. And I highly recommend that you develop business criteria so that when you make a decision to grant or deny a request, it's based on operational concerns within your office. The Department of Justice has a couple of sources you might be interested in. One of them is the DOJ Telework Guide, which we updated in January of 2006. This is also published online. And we do have eligibility criteria. I'm not going to read these to you, but we have, for example, positions compatible with telework. So you might be looking at the fact that specific work activities are portable and can be performed effectively outside of the office. I want to point out one of the criteria, which is security and confidentiality of data, including sensitive, non-classified Privacy Act information can be adequately assured. Now, the reason why I'm pointing that out is we've had all this stuff in the last couple of years with the VA and losing laptops and, oh my gosh, we can't have people telework because what about the security of information? The U.S. Department of Justice is saying you can take Privacy Act and sensitive information home, but we want to make sure that you're adequately securing that information. So we train our employees and our managers on how to make sure information is properly secured. Classified information does not leave the work site. So again, you want to look at business criteria. We don't want to play Solomon and worry about personal reasons for a request. Too often I've heard managers say, you know, I don't want to start telework because not everybody's going to be eligible and I'm going to have to say no to some people.